This is the audio for a post on the Movements in America Substack. Check out the website at movementsinamerica.substack.com. Link is in the description. But what do you do about teaching and movements? In my last post, I asked everyone to comment if they wanted me to elaborate on any particular subject, and only Rachel Aaliyah Johnson took me up on my offer. She requests that I expand more on elder development in movements in America. This post goes out to her, the constant question. Whenever I talk with Christian leaders about the movement work I'm engaged in, there's one question that almost always comes up in the first conversation. They'll say, "But what do you do about teaching?" I'll be sharing my burden for the lost in my city, telling how God convicted me to multiply disciples, and yet many brothers and sisters skip past all that to ask about teaching. I understand why. In American Christianity, leadership development often revolves around teaching, whether that's seminary training or one-on-one discipleship. Scripture is saturated with commands to preserve sound teaching, particularly in a way that leads to obedience. In my heart, I'm a biblicist. I want to do everything the New Testament models and commands the church to do. The New Testament church multiplied, so we must multiply. The New Testament church taught, and so we must teach. That naturally raises the next question. How do you develop elders? P.S. I say elders rather than pastors because in the New Testament, church leaders are most often called elders. Elders are meant to shepherd and teach, so this is a fair and important question. Globally, disciple-making movements, DMM, are intentional about elder development. In America, though, we've lagged behind. That's starting to change. In the past 2 to 3 years, several movement leaders, including myself, have been working hard to raise up elders. Here's why it took so long, and what's happening now. Why the delay? Most modern DMM practitioners in America learn from work in Asia. Almost all U.S.-based movement efforts were originally started by missionaries returning from Asia and teaching what they'd learned overseas. When my friends and I wanted to appoint and develop elders, we followed a similar pattern by asking our South Asian missionary friends for guidance. One, whom I'll call David, compared elder development to a train. The locomotive is multiplication, often driven by apostolic and evangelistic leaders. The caboose is elder development. Leave the caboose at the station, and the movement lacks depth and won't last. But if the caboose tries to lead, the movement stalls. The goal is for the caboose to follow closely behind the locomotive, never lagging too far, never rushing ahead. For David's work, which spanned a vast geographic area and encompassed over 1 million believers, they would engage in their elder development after a stream of multiplication got to at least third-generation churches. This would usually take 1.5 to 2 years. At that point, they would gather all the elders from the stream together monthly to train them on how to teach their congregation by walking through the meta-narrative of the Bible. After this, the stream would formalize into an association of churches and would continue to meet regularly to develop doctrine together under the oversight of an outside, more mature leader. The first people attempting to apply movement principles to America, including myself, ran into many hurdles that prevented us from getting anywhere close to third-generation churches. We were still figuring out how to best share the gospel, find persons of peace, baptize believers, and group them together for further discipleship. We weren't multiplying because we had yet to overcome the #1 obstacle to multiplication in America, so we kept focusing on getting to generational growth, only addressing shepherding and teaching when absolutely necessary. By 2019, we realized this was a mistake. Our apostolic leaders started first-generation churches years before, led them, then kept leading them, then kept leading and kept leading until it seemed like we would never get the chance to hand off leadership to others like Paul did when he started churches. We kept reading the Word and saw that Paul appointed elders, but when we tried to do this, our attempts largely fell on their face. We really didn't know what we were doing. We had some first-generation churches, a few shaky second-generation, and occasionally we saw the glimpse of a third-generation church. But we absolutely needed to figure out this elders issue if the work was going to progress. Adapting movement principles to America. Again, I mentioned in a footnote in my post about my time in Houston that God taught us to have more depth in our gatherings instead of merely focusing on training and evangelizing constantly. As we in Movement Network became more balanced, those with shepherding and teaching giftings actually stayed with our gatherings, which gave us the right people to appoint and train to be elders. As we appointed gifted elders, we immediately noticed that the missional leaders finally had the freedom to continue to go to new areas to help more disciples and churches multiply. They could be more mobile without worrying that their original church starts would fall away. Once gifted elders were in place, our missional leaders had freedom to move into new areas without worrying that their original church starts would collapse. Healthy elder appointment brought stability. As we look to what David did in South Asia and what other movements did in other parts of the world, it was clear that most elder development focused on teaching and not shepherding. That's great for their context, but from what I can gather, in the United States, around 95% of the discipleship issues that come up are related to shepherding. This isn't a hard stat because I haven't directly asked about church health and maturity issues when I have interviewed movement leaders. So I'm not as confident in saying this as I am about other aspects of movements in America. Even still, as I have examined the work of hundreds of churches around America, I can only remember 3 instances where someone brought in false teaching in such a way that it significantly impacted an entire church. By contrast, I've heard dozens of stories of churches struggling with habitual sin, relational conflict, immaturity, burnout, marital breakdown, mental health crises, all heart-level issues that require a shepherding response. Because of this, we created a uniquely Western process, borrowing the teaching-focused framework from David, but crowdsourcing the shepherding emphasis from our network and others around the country. What we've done so far. This past year, Movement Network piloted a 9-month elder development process. Here's some bullet points of the general structure. Monthly online calls for all elders. Each call included time to care for and pray for each other. Different leaders, inside and outside the network, taught each month's topic. Built-in accountability to apply what was learned. Allowed participation from a few not yet appointed elders. Not every elder attended every session. These were the monthly topics. Soul care, shepherding the flock of God. One another's, facilitating the one another's within the 3/3, the gathering, and throughout the week. Leadership, leading from vision to multiply leaders. Spiritual gifts, equipping and empowering the church to take initiative in their spiritual gifts. Mature church, guiding the church toward maturity. Hermeneutics, interpreting and teaching the word. Church discipline, restoring disciples to Jesus in the church. Protecting from wolves, knowing when and how to use your staff as a club. Pathway to sustaining multiplication, identifying, developing, and appointing elders and apostles. This rough draft will be refined in the next few years, and hopefully, we will be able to reproduce it with other networks. One of the leaders in our network has already been getting requests left and right from other leaders asking for what we did. We may have started late, but we've started. I believe that in a few years, we'll see evangelism, discipleship, church planting, leadership development, and elder training all happening simultaneously in a mutually supportive way. I am convinced that this is needed if we are going to see movements start that will change the landscape of religion in the United States. Thanks for listening. Be sure to pick up my book, Movements in America, on Amazon if you want to learn more about how God is multiplying disciples and churches around the United States. The link is in the description,